They sent her as a joke. Not a soldier. Not a diplomat. Not even a servant worth keeping. Just a body. A diplomatic insult wrapped in royal silk and sealed with a signature that carried the weight of an empire. Across thousands of star systems, among civilizations that had conquered gravity, folded space, and bent suns to their will, there were still things that could make an empire laugh. And today, that thing was her. Princess Veilira of the Valari Dominion stood silently inside the transport chamber, her massive ceremonial robes draped around her like a collapsing star. The courtiers watching from the observation deck whispered behind jeweled hands, their voices filled with amusement that barely tried to hide itself. Imagine sending that as a royal gift. A disgrace to the bloodline. The humans will think we're mocking them. That was the point. For generations, the Valari believed beauty equaled power. Grace meant superiority. Their royal bloodlines were engineered for perfection. Tall, elegant, impossibly symmetrical. Veilira was none of those things. She was larger, heavier, slower than the others. Where her siblings moved like blades of light, she moved like gravity itself, undeniable but inconvenient. To the Empire, she was a flaw that could not be corrected. So they turned her into a message aimed directly at humanity. The newest rising power in the Galactic Council. Unpredictable, unrefined, annoyingly resilient. Humans had requested a royal liaison as a sign of alliance. So the Valari sent them their greatest embarrassment. A living insult. The Emperor himself had signed the order. "Send Princess Veilira," he had said with bored amusement. "Let the humans keep her." The transport ship hummed as its engines prepared for the long jump through folded space. Veilira didn't protest. She didn't cry. She didn't beg the Emperor to reconsider. She simply stood there, listening. Listening to the laughter. Listening to the whispers. Listening to an empire erase her existence. Because in their eyes, she had already been discarded. Outside the chamber window, the stars stretched into bright silver lines as the ship entered warp. No farewell ceremony. No royal escort. Just a cargo manifest that listed her as Diplomatic Transfer Unit, Biological. Not princess. Not royalty. Cargo. The Valari court watched the ship disappear into the void. And somewhere among them, one noble quietly said with a smirk, "Let's see how long the humans tolerate her." But the universe has always loved irony. Because on a small human frontier station orbiting a quiet blue star, there was a mechanic named Daniel Reyes. A man who fixed broken ships. A man who had spent his entire life surrounded by things others threw away. Scrap metal. Burned engines. Failed machines. To most people, broken things were useless. To Daniel, broken things were just waiting for someone to see their true value. And very soon, a forgotten princess from the most arrogant empire in the galaxy was about to arrive at his station. Not as royalty. Not as an insult. But as something far more dangerous. Because sometimes the universe sends exactly what you need, disguised as everything you never asked for. The human colony of Ridgeback Station wasn't impressive. It hung in orbit around a quiet blue world on the outer edge of mapped space, a place the larger empires barely bothered to acknowledge. From a distance, the station looked less like a city and more like a pile of metal someone had forgotten to throw away. Docking arms extended at awkward angles. Cargo modules had been welded together over decades of patchwork repairs. Some sections still carried burn marks from pirate attacks that happened years ago. Nothing about Ridgeback Station was beautiful, but everything about it worked. Freighters moved in and out constantly. Mining barges hauled ore from nearby asteroid belts. Repair drones crawled across hull plates like metal insects. Humans had built it the way they built most things. Rough, practical, and stubbornly alive. Inside Docking Bay 12, Daniel Reyes wiped grease from his hands with an old rag that had stopped being clean years ago. The engine in front of him looked like it had tried to explode twice and failed both times. Daniel crouched beside it, tightening a bolt while muttering to himself. Yeah, complain all you want," he said to the machine. "You're still getting fixed." The nearby loader drone beeped softly. Daniel ignored it. Being a mechanic on a frontier station meant two things. Everything broke, and nobody else wanted to fix it, which made him valuable. Above him, the docking bay speakers crackled to life. Attention Docking Bay 12. Incoming diplomatic vessel from the Valari Dominion. Daniel paused mid-repair. Valari. Even out here on the edge of civilized space, that name carried weight. Tall, elegant, untouchable. Galactic royalty. They didn't visit places like Ridgeback. The workers nearby stopped what they were doing, watching as a sleek silver ship slid into the docking bay like a blade cutting through water. Compared to the station's battered freighters, the vessel looked impossibly perfect. Polished hull. Glowing royal insignia. A ship designed not for survival, but for impressing people. Daniel raised an eyebrow. Well, he muttered, that looks expensive. The ship settled onto the landing platform with graceful silence. Then the hatch opened. Two Valari escorts stepped out first. Tall, thin, perfect posture. Their uniforms shimmered with noble insignia as they scanned the bay with clear distaste. One of them spoke into a translation device. Where is the human liaison assigned to receive the royal transfer? A nearby officer awkwardly stepped forward. But before anyone could answer, she appeared. At first, there was only movement inside the ship's shadow. Then Princess Veilira stepped onto the ramp. The entire docking bay seemed to hesitate, because she was nothing like the Valari escorts. Where they were narrow and sharp, she was broader, heavier. Her royal robes flowed around her like deep violet waves, embroidered with symbols of a dynasty that clearly didn't want her anymore. Some workers stared. Others tried not to. One Valari escort looked openly embarrassed. But Daniel Reyes noticed something different. Not her size. Not the way the escorts avoided looking at her. He noticed her eyes. They carried the quiet exhaustion of someone who had spent a lifetime being measured, and found lacking. The kind of exhaustion you couldn't fake. The kind you only earned by surviving too many silent humiliations. Veilira stepped down from the ramp slowly, carefully, as if she expected the ground itself to reject her. The Valari escort spoke loudly to the station officer. By decree of the Valari Emperor, Princess Veilira is hereby transferred as diplomatic liaison to the Human Alliance. The way he said it made the word princess sound like a joke. The workers exchanged glances. Even the officer looked uncomfortable. Daniel leaned against the engine beside him, watching quietly. Then Veilira's gaze drifted across the docking bay. And for a brief moment, it met his. No judgment. No mockery. Just curiosity. Daniel straightened and wiped his hands again. Then he walked over. The Valari escorts stiffened immediately. Human, one said coldly, this area is restricted. Daniel ignored him. He stopped a few steps away from the princess and tilted his head slightly, studying her. Not like a noble. Not like a critic. Like a mechanic examining something misunderstood. Finally, he nodded once. I fix things, he said calmly. The Valari guards frowned. But Daniel looked directly at Veilira when he finished. I'm good at knowing what's broken. He glanced briefly at the uncomfortable escorts beside her. And what's just been treated badly. The cafeteria was loud. Clanging trays. Hissing steam vents. Voices competing with the hum of recycled air. But for Princess Veilira, it might as well have been a storm on a distant gas giant. Chaotic, sharp, and entirely hostile. The Valari escorts had insisted she dine with the visiting delegation instead of the humans. But Ridgeback Station had no formal, diplomatic hall. It had a long metal table with scratched benches, a place where miners, engineers, and station personnel wolfed down protein packs in 30-second increments between work shifts. Veilira sat alone, her royal robes brushing the floor, a bubble of alien elegance in a room built for practicality. The whispers started immediately. Did they really send her? Her. Looks like the Valari ran out of acceptable heirs. One particularly cruel voice, a Valari aide named Soren, leaned over, voice loud enough for nearby humans to hear. Tell me, princess, Soren said, a smirk in every syllable, did they groom you to be this useless, or is it natural talent? The room went still for a moment. The kind of silence that carries tension instead of respect. Veolyra looked up at him, shoulders straight, head high. "I graduated top of my class," she said evenly, almost politely, "with honors in diplomacy, engineering, and xenostrategic theory." A laugh rang out. Not human. Not amused. Soren leaned closer, sneering. "Yet here you are. Obese. Worthless." Veolyra's lips pressed into a thin line. She said nothing more. She did not rise to insult. She did not cry. She did not beg. Her silence was a shield, a quiet, measured dignity that somehow made Soren angrier. Daniel Reyes, sitting nearby with a tray of half-eaten rations, finally put down his fork. He stood and walked over, voice calm but firm. "Enough." The Valari aide froze, surprised. "You, human." "I said enough," Daniel repeated. "This is a human station. Here, people earn respect for what they do, not how they look." Soren sneered but backed off. Veolyra's gaze found Daniel's. For a fleeting second, a flicker of relief crossed her features. After the lunch crowd dispersed, Daniel returned to the princess, carrying 2 trays. "You don't have to eat alone," he said simply. Veolyra sighed, a sound like air escaping from an overpressurized chamber. "I was top of my class," she admitted quietly, "and none of it mattered. I was fat. Therefore, worthless." Daniel tilted his head, studying her for a long moment. Then he shrugged. "Some people measure value in numbers and appearances. Others don't." The princess offered a small, almost imperceptible smile. Later, back in the station's repair bay, an opportunity presented itself. A cargo loader had failed mid-cycle, sparks flying and hydraulics locked in place. Valari engineers hesitated, muttering about waiting for proper assistance. Veolyra stepped forward. Her hands moved with precision, fingers working over circuits and pressure valves. The loader system hummed, clicked, and then roared back to life. Daniel, who had been observing silently, blinked. Then he smiled. "She's brilliant," he whispered to no one in particular. Because in a galaxy that measured worth by symmetry and size, Princess Veolyra had just reminded him that true genius had nothing to do with appearances. And for the first time, Daniel realized he wasn't the only one who could see it. The ambassador arrived like a storm. Tall, silver-clad, voice sharpened by centuries of Valari entitlement. Every word he spoke dripped with superiority, every glance measured the humans, and Princess Veolyra, as inconvenient obstacles. "Your station is quaint," he said, eyes flicking over Ridgeback's battered hulls and exposed piping. "I suppose you believe you can manage even basic interstellar operations without my guidance?" Daniel muttered under his breath, but Veolyra ignored him. She had learned long ago that arrogance often spoke louder than skill, and skill, when properly applied, could make arrogance irrelevant. The alarm blared before the ambassador could finish his condescending smirk. A cargo transport in the docking bay had malfunctioned. Its magnetic clamps were frozen, engines locked, and failure to release the load threatened to crush several human workers. The Valari ambassador stepped forward, commanding gestures like a general issuing orders, but Ridgeback's crew froze. Their equipment was older. Their manuals outdated. The situation was impossible. 6 hours to repair, they said. But failure meant catastrophe. Veolyra stepped out from the shadows. "Diagnostics lie," she said quietly, almost to herself, but loud enough for Daniel to hear. Heads turned. The Valari ambassador's smirk faltered. "Excuse me." "I said the diagnostics lie," Veolyra repeated, hands already scanning circuits and pressure lines with confident precision. "They only show the failure we expect. They don't show the underlying imbalance." The crew hesitated. Then Daniel joined her, wiping grease from his hands, standing at her side. Together, they examined the loader. Veolyra's hands moved like instruments of certainty. Where others panicked, she was calm. Where others searched blindly, she saw patterns. A loose power conduit here, a misaligned hydraulic regulator there. 6 hours' worth of complex repairs became 4 hours of deliberate, controlled motion. For the first time in her life, someone listened to me. She ignored the ambassador's incredulous stares, the whispers of her peers, the nagging self-doubt that had haunted her for decades. Every adjustment was precise. Every correction decisive. Daniel watched her, awestruck, as she manipulated a system even he could not fully comprehend. The transporter's engines roared back to life. The magnetic clamps released. The cargo settled safely. The station exhaled as the crisis passed. The Valari ambassador opened his mouth to claim credit for human ingenuity, but Veolyra shook her head subtly. She stepped back, covered her hands, and allowed Daniel and the crew to receive the applause. Her satisfaction was quiet, internal. She had accomplished what no one thought possible. Daniel glanced at her. You didn't tell anyone that you solved it." Veolyra shrugged, expression unreadable. "Why should I? The job is done. That's what matters." Daniel nodded slowly. "And yet, for the first time, you let someone see you." She allowed a small, private smile, almost invisible. A human might have missed it. But he didn't. In that moment, she wasn't a princess sent as an insult. She wasn't obese or worthless by the Empire's cruel standards. She was a force. Focused. Brilliant. Unstoppable. And Ridgeback Station, ragged, practical, and human, had just been shown the power of someone who refused to be measured by appearances. The Valari ambassador, flustered and exposed, had nothing left to say. Veolyra's secret victory remained hers alone. And Daniel realized something quietly thrilling. In a universe that had never truly valued her, she had finally proven what humans already knew. Genius doesn't care about size or status. The Valari ambassador lingered long after the transporter crisis was resolved, his silver robes brushing against the metal floor, voice sharp and condescending. "You handled the situation adequately," he said, though his eyes were calculating. "But let's not pretend your methods were anything more than luck. Surely the humans could not have managed without my guidance." Veolyra stood in the shadow of the docking bay, her arms folded. She let the words fall over her, heavy as starship steel. Her instinct, her natural pride, urged her to correct him, to assert herself. But she didn't. Not yet. Instead, she smiled faintly and lowered her gaze. "Yes, Ambassador," she said softly. "You are correct. Humans are clever, but I am not, exactly, essential." The ambassador's lips curled into a satisfied smirk. Finally, the princess appeared as he expected, small, useless, incapable. The perfect object of his superiority. Daniel Reyes watched from the edge of the bay, heart tightening. He wanted to argue, to announce her brilliance. But she shook her head slightly, almost imperceptibly. She had chosen this moment. Not for herself, but for the station. By allowing the Valari to underestimate her, she protected Ridgeback. Any suspicion that she was dangerous or capable of independent genius could have provoked a political response, sanctions, inspections, even military intervention. By appearing weak, she drew the spotlight away from the humans she had sworn to protect. Later, after the ambassador had departed, the bay was quiet. Sparks from the previous repairs still glimmered in the dim light. Veolyra leaned against a console, finally allowing herself to exhale. Daniel approached, brushing grease from his hands. "I don't understand," he said quietly. "You solved everything. You saved the cargo, the station, and yet you let him say those things." Veolyra's eyes met his, calm but tired. "I protected you," she admitted softly. "I protected Ridgeback Station by being what everyone expects, the useless princess." Daniel's hands dropped to his sides. He shook his head slowly. "No," he said firmly. "What you're good at is being brilliant. Don't hide it. That's your real power." She smiled faintly, a mixture of gratitude and melancholy. "Sometimes," she said, "brilliance is safest when it's invisible." Daniel considered her words, understanding dawning. In a universe that measured worth by appearances, by symmetry and obedience, Veolyra had learned to wield intelligence like a shield. Quiet, precise, unseen, yet even hidden, it radiated. He stepped closer, his voice firm. "I don't care if they call you fat, useless, or anything else. Here, you're not an insult. You're the one who sees what others can't. The one who saves what everyone else would lose." Veolyra's gaze softened. For a fleeting moment, The weight of centuries of humiliation lifted, replaced by a new certainty. She was more than the labels imposed by an empire. She had purpose, agency, strength. And Daniel understood something he hadn't before. In this ragged station of humans who often overlook their own potential, the true power wasn't in wealth or status, but in insight, courage, and the wisdom to act, even when no one else recognized it. Veolyra nodded faintly, letting herself absorb the rare acknowledgement. Her sacrifice had been invisible to the world. But in Daniel's eyes, it had not been wasted. For the first time, she felt the quiet reassurance of being truly seen. The calm terminal glowed cold blue in the quiet of her quarters. Veolyra hesitated before touching it, a sense of trepidation curling in her stomach. The sender was no minor ambassador. It was Imperial Chancellor Terran, a figure whose shadow stretched across the Valari dominion. Every word from him carried authority, power, and expectation. Princess Veolyra, his voice resonated through the speaker, crisp and deliberate, your performance has been noted. The Empire recognizes your capabilities, which have been underestimated far too long. We offer you promotion, command of a vessel, and full recognition of your talents. Your contributions will no longer be dismissed. Veolyra listened quietly, heart pounding, as a life she had been denied all her existence unfolded in his words. Status, recognition, power, everything she had ever been told she was incapable of having. The next words chilled her even more. But, the Chancellor continued, we also understand human sentiment. I trust the station's liaison. Daniel Reyes, you call him? Tell me, does he love you? Veolyra's breath caught. She had never expected to be asked. Never in the cold halls of the Empire, never in the whispers of a universe that measured her worth by symmetry. She looked at Daniel, who stood by the door, arms crossed, eyes steady. I think he does, she admitted softly. Daniel stepped closer, voice low, raw, honest. Veolyra, I love you. She blinked. His words weren't formal. They weren't regal. They weren't measured. They were honest, pure. I love you because you see me, he said, stepping closer, hands trembling slightly. You see me, even when the universe tells me I'm broken. You see me for what I am, stubborn, foolish, brilliant, and human. You let me be myself, even when the world refuses to notice. And in return, I see you. I see your courage, your intelligence, the fire you carry when you've been told you are worthless. I love you for the way you survive, for the way you fight, for the way you forgive even when you don't have to. I love you because the universe has called you everything, and you're still standing. Veolyra's chest tightened. His words were heavier than any crown, more valuable than any title. Daniel, the Empire is offering me everything I've ever been denied, she whispered. Power, respect, recognition. He shook his head, eyes glinting. And they aren't home. They can never be home. You offer recognition. He offered home. Her heart surged. She had spent centuries under the weight of expectations, insults, and cold measurements of worth. And here in Ridgeback Station, in a messy, flawed place built on grease and determination, she had found something the Empire could never give, belonging. I can't leave, she said firmly, stepping closer. Not now. Not ever. Daniel smiled, half in relief, half in awe. Then we fight together, he said. Whatever they offer, whatever they threaten, we stay here. Together. Veolyra rested a hand on his shoulder, eyes locking with his. In the messy human station that never expected greatness, they had found each other. And for the first time, the universe felt like a place that might just recognize them, not for what they were told to be, but for who they truly were. The chamber aboard the Valari flagship was vast, cold, and perfectly symmetrical, every inch designed to intimidate, to remind visitors of their place in the galaxy. And at its center stood the Emperor. A figure of legend and fear, robed in silver and gold, exuding authority like gravity itself. His eyes scanned Veolyra with calculated precision. Princess Veolyra, he said, voice low and commanding, you have been overlooked. Your body, your presence, all of it disregarded. But perhaps you deserve correction. The Empire offers restoration, honors, positions, recognition. Return with me, and you will be valued as you were meant to be. Veolaira's gaze did not waver. Years of humiliation, rejection, and exile had tempered her. The cold perfection of this chamber, the weight of 1,000 judgments, meant nothing compared to what she had found on Ridgeback Station. "You call it overlooked," she said, voice steady, cutting through the Emperor's aura like a laser. "I call it judgment based on arrogance. My worth was never yours to define. And your recognition is meaningless if it comes without understanding, without respect, without love." The Emperor's eyes narrowed. "You think you can refuse the galaxy for... what? A human mechanic?" Daniel stood behind her, hands clenched, but she stepped forward, placing a hand lightly on his shoulder. "Yes," she said. "For love. For home. For the place and people who saw me for what I truly am." The Emperor's lips curled, sharp and warning. "Do not be naive. He will die decades before you." Veolaira inhaled, feeling the weight of mortality, the finite nature of life, the cruel brevity of human years. Then she exhaled, calm and resolute. "Then I will have decades of being loved truly," she replied, voice unwavering. The Emperor's expression hardened. "Your defiance will be remembered. The Empire does not forgive such choices lightly." Veolaira tilted her head, a quiet finality in her eyes. "The Empire has already forgotten me once. I will not forget myself again." With that, the transmission ended. The chamber went silent. Daniel stepped forward, catching her as her knees weakened. The weight of confrontation, of defiance, of finally choosing her own path, pressed down on her. She collapsed into his arms. He held her firmly, whispering, "It's over. You're safe. Here." Her head rested against his chest, heartbeat steadying against the chaos of the galaxy. The bridge to the Valari Empire had been burned forever. No honor, no crown, no empire could ever undo the choice she had made. For the first time in her life, Princess Veolaira, once dismissed, mocked, and measured by every cruel standard, felt whole. And she was finally home. 5 years had passed. Ridgeback Station had changed, quietly but profoundly. Docking bays hummed with efficiency, repairs ran smoother, and even the human crews moved with a confidence that had once seemed impossible. The colony thrived, not because the Empire noticed, but because those who had been overlooked learned to survive, adapt, and build a life of their own. In the corner of the station's modest home, Veolaira leaned over a workbench, delicately adjusting the circuits of a repurposed generator. Her hands moved with the same precision that had saved the transporter years ago. Her robes were gone, replaced with practical sleeves rolled up, grease smudges across the forearms, the same Veolaira, but now entirely at ease in her own skin. Daniel Reyes sat nearby, sipping recycled coffee, the corners of his eyes lined with faint creases, a subtle reminder that humans age, that time moves differently than the stars. She looked up and smiled softly. "Do you ever regret staying here?" Daniel paused, setting the cup down. He thought of all the victories, all the crises, all the quiet, ordinary moments they had shared. He thought of the galaxy that still churned with empires, politics, and arrogance, and how easily they could have been drawn back into it. "I regret the things I cannot change," he said slowly. "The years we've lost, the dangers we've faced, the knowledge that the Valari Empire will always see me as just a human mechanic. I carry those regrets." He reached out, brushing her hair back from her face. "But I would never regret choosing you. Not for a second. Never for a single moment. You are the life I want, the home I never imagined, the brilliance I could not ignore." Veolaira placed her hand over his. "Then we've made the right choices," she whispered. "For ourselves. Not for crowns. Not for approval." They leaned back, watching the station hum with life outside the reinforced windows. Freight ships slipped in and out like slow-moving stars, miners and engineers moving with purpose. A colony once ignored now pulsed with quiet resilience. Veolaira rested her head on Daniel's shoulder, sighing. "In a universe built on arrogance and aesthetics," she murmured, "sometimes being seen is enough to shift the stars." He smiled faintly, letting the warmth of her presence settle into his chest. "Yes," he said softly. "Being seen, fully, without judgment, that is the kind of gravity even empires cannot compete with." Outside, the stars stretched endlessly, indifferent yet beautiful. But inside Ridgeback Station, they had created something more enduring than any Valari decree or imperial insult. A life measured not by perfection, but by understanding, love, and quiet brilliance. Valeira looked up once more at the softly glowing lights of the station and whispered, almost to herself, "We are home. And that is enough." And somewhere, in the infinite cosmos of arrogance, politics, and ambition, the weight of two human hearts quietly proved that even small choices, the courage to be oneself, the bravery to love, could ripple through the stars.